did anybody, I know at least one of you did what I said was the homework assignment, was to try making a grayscale to make a gray and to make a primary. Did anybody else try it out? Did you? Would you mind sharing the example that you ran into, the challenge, just so we can talk about it for a second? Right, so we got 5 really good tonal steps. The gray isn't as gray as you would like, right?
So what color should I have used?
Okay, well,
which blue and which red?
So the best purple that you can make with the colors that I've provided. Anybody else want to take a shot at answering that question? Give people the opportunity to learn. Which blue and which red would have made the best purple of the ones that we had? Got it, yeah. Because that is our blue that is headed towards red, and that is our red that is headed towards blue. And the middle point between those in a traditional color wheel is purple, or in the visible spectrum, violet, right? Yeah, so those, if that particular gray, we're really pulling out a lot of red. So your purple may have just been a little too far towards red, right? So if we wanted to pull it back towards gray, perhaps we could have added a little bit of what to it? If it's leaning towards red, what would pull it back towards the center of our greenish, right? Now you guys don't have a green, and that's where all this stuff gets complicated, right? That was part of this activity, was you had to mix a secondary color to make your gray with the primary color that you had in your paint set, right? In addition to wanting you guys to continue to try and see equal steps in tone as well too, which is important as well too. So anyway, thank you for being willing to share something you consider to not be successful. I think as long as we are learning, we are successful. So today we're going to talk about transparency, right? So there's the obvious way you can get transparency with color is to work really thin, right? Like we've talked before about what a puny color yellow is. You can put yellow over top of anything and it's transparent, right? Because it just, particularly if it's a saturated yellow, it has no oomph to it, right? Versus like that ultramarine blue, you can put that over top of almost any other color that you've got in your little color pack, and it'll just totally disappear, right? Well, what we're talking about today, you guys remember this from the last class, right? Is giving the impression through the use of color that there is an object or part of the composition which is transparent, right? So I think we might have talked about, I technically have turned this sideways from the way Albers made it. This was a photograph in his original book of a piece of acetate which has a bluish tone laid over top. So we talked about why this red being a red that's headed towards blue, and this red being a red that's heading towards yellow, right? That's why this might appear to be a little bit headed towards a gray or desaturated, versus this actually just pulls out the blue, because you're looking through an actual transparent material. So I thought we'd look at a few more examples of transparency, right? So what we have here, and this is I don't think this is actually a color play from one of Albert's classes, but it might be. I don't remember where I got this one, but it's interesting because, right, what we see here, the appearance that this you can see through this color to the blue that's underneath, right? Now we know that that's not actually the case, right? Like, how many colors are there in this composition? 2, 4. 1, 2. Probably shouldn't touch this. 3, 4. Right? So the artist picked orange and blue, which are, what's the word for those two types of color? Begins with C. Complementary, right? They're on the opposite side of whatever color sphere or spectrum or circle that you want to use. So they will tend towards gray, right? And so they were able to create a color which is, and this is where the tone stuff really becomes important. This is really, I think it's kind of hard to see. I hope you guys can see it. That this blue is actually darker than this gray right here. It's a little hard to see, and why is that? What's the difference between this color and this color? think about things in terms of the 3 dimensions of color. This color is closer towards what part of the, it's closer towards the center and the bottom, right? But it's desaturated, right? So even though this color is darker, if we were to take a photograph of this with our phones and turn it to black and white, you would see 1, 2, 3, 4 steps in tone, right? Any questions about this? How the artist might have mixed this?
So, I'm trying to, was one of those squares painted and allowed to dry, and then the other was?
If I were to make you guys do this activity, I would make you mix 4 colors. You would, this blue, how do you think you would get to this blue? Phthalo blue and a little bit of, maybe a little bit of white, because it doesn't come out of the tube. This is like that cyan color. If you're painting over top of something white, that cyan color that that Scottish artist was talking about would look close to this over top of a white surface,
But,
right?
this actually came out really well even on the phone.
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, and you can see there's, it's not quite, you can actually see how much darker this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
than everything else. Even though it's much, much more, there's 2 different ways we could describe it that would effectively say the same thing. We could say it is more saturated than the other colors, or we could also say it has a higher, another word that also begins with C, higher chroma. Right, exactly. Thank you. All right, any questions? Let's look at some more of these. Here's another one that deals with transparency. Again, this is similar. I apologize that this image did not blow up super well. Not surprisingly, a lot of the images from this book are not available for free on the internet, and I'm cheap, so I found free versions. But there is, oh shoot, I thought I had a bookmark. Give me just a moment, please. I could be able to find them. No. Okay, well, we'll just have to talk about these like they are up on the screen. Shoot. All right. So similar to some of the exercises we've seen, these are basically flipped, right? You've got this color. I'm not going to put the color checker from my Mac on these, but these, I promise you, these are the same color, right? So how did the artist arrive at this color right here? It's a mix of which 2 other colors that are present? Yeah, this particular red and this green. Are these, other than the yellow, are any of these colors very saturated? Everything's a little muted, kind of moving towards the middle a little bit, right? And so it gives the impression of transparency, but to your question earlier, like this is not an example of where the artist painted the background and then just painted. I mean, certainly you could approach it that way. In this class, when this is taught or in a color class, when this is taught as an activity, you would mix 7, 8 colors to make this particular composition, right? What do we notice about this particular color right here? It's grayed, but is it gray? Is it neutral? Not really. Why do we think that is?
Probably needs a little blue.
Yeah, right? Because you're
Gray.
probably working with
It's
a
brownish.
tinted version of a red, maybe in this area, and a tinted, does everybody remember what tinted means?
No.
Like it's a desaturation of a color using white, whereas a shade is a desaturation of a color using gray or black, right? So you're not like these, in other words, this red and this blue are not directly across our color wheel from each other, right? Remember how we've talked about the you desaturate as you move towards the center, you move towards a true gray, but before you get there, you get these kind of, we call them muddy colors, right? They've still got a little bit of color in them. They're graying, moving towards gray, but they're not grayed out yet, right? And so if this brown is moving in a warm direction, somebody already said it, if we wanted to move it back towards a neutral gray, which would be the color to add. Yeah, something from this side. Does that make sense, right? Cause again, we're trying to desaturate,
We're
which
trying to
means
move that arrow back this way.
moving the arrow, up this way, if you think about color as a three-dimensional shape. Cool, any questions about that? Okay. Let's take a look at another example. This one kind of relates to, so you can see here that, a couple things, right? One of the things is, an example of what a puny color yellow can be, right? So this yellow, I promise you, if I put the color checker on this, right, we would see that yellow is exactly the same in each of those images. Here's a little bit better example. But it appears to have different levels of transparency as it moves over top of these three bands of color. So why does the yellow not appear to change on the outside? Yeah, right. That's something that you have to keep in mind, is the color of the surface that you're painting on will come into play as well too. Yep. And what's the other thing that is kind of interesting about the yellow as it passes over the purple? What are yellow and purple supposed to do to each other? Yeah, they're complements, so they're supposed to. Yeah, it's supposed to push each other towards gray, theoretically, right?
But that purple has a lot of red in it.
Right. So you can see that this particular yellow has a lot of red in it already, and this particular, this purple is like it's headed towards red fast, right? And so, and with these colors in the middle, definitely the